Good afternoon. Thank you for Hi, thank you for joining us today for our Texas Holocaust Remembrance Week programming. We are very happy today to have Wendy Lockhard with us presenting on female rescuers and resistance fighters. We'll begin today's presentation with a few words from Texas State Senator Jose Menendez before we introduce our speaker.
Hi, I'm State Senator Jose Menendez, and I'd like to welcome you to Holocaust. Hi, I'm State Senator Jose Menendez, and I'd like to welcome you to Holocaust Remembrance Week of 2020.
Apologize. We're having some technical difficulties with our presentations today. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce Wendy Lockhard, and she will be leading a presentation on female rescuers and resistance.
I got it. And this too. Hello, everybody. My name is Wendy Lockhard, and I live in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. And I'm coming to you today from the San Antonio Holocaust Memorial and Museum. And it's such a pleasure and an honor to be here with you and to introduce to you some very special women of the Holocaust who were rescuers or resistance fighters. And so today we're going to take a look at a few of the women who participated in this cause. But first, I'd like for you to take a look at each one, and I'm going to read to you a quote from each one, and maybe you can decide for yourself, what is it that they did? What was it that caused them to care and to dare to be different and to reach out to their fellow man? So this is Hannah Senis, and she said at one time, one needs to believe in something for which one can have wholehearted enthusiasm. One needs to feel that one's life has meaning, that one is needed in this world. Sarah Janate said, the farmer's wife offered us food, but we declined, saying we were in a hurry. She looked me over carefully and told me that war was not for women to fight. I didn't wait for a reply as I asked her, and the killing of women and children, proper work for men? All right, here we have Hanneke Ipich. And this was from the time she was in the prison. Oh no. This one. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh, okay, here we go. Start again. Sorry about that. So now we're going to go back to when you could see some of these women. Corrie ten Boom. Happiness isn't something that depends on our surroundings. It's something that we make inside of ourselves. Going back, Hannah Ipich. This is when she was in a prison. She said, that beautiful Dutch sky always changing. There were times when it was a brilliant blue, but often the clouds sailed by, blown by the strong Dutch wind. Mostly, though, the sky was gray and full of sadness, and the rain came down for days on end, as if shedding tears for all who suffered. So maybe we want to find out what she did to cause her imprisonment. Sarah Janate said, the farmer's wife offered us food, but we declined, saying we were in a hurry. She looked me over carefully and told me that war was not for women to fight. I didn't wait for a reply as I asked her, and the killing of women and children proper work for men? I'll go a little forward and I'm back again. I forgot where we were. So Hannah Senis, all right. One needs something to believe in, something for which one can have wholehearted enthusiasm. One needs to feel that one's life has meaning and that one is needed in the world. So here we have a few of the ladies that I chose to show you today so that you could take a look at what they did that caused them to care in the first place and what they did, the activities that they did that were daring in the face of danger and even life. All right. And now we start with Sarah Janate. All right, here she is, a Lithuanian resistance fighter. Now take a look at her. The Soviet prisoners and other soldiers that were in the area thought that it was very unusual that a Lithuanian female was armed and standing guard. But Sarah thought that this was important work for her to do. She was born in Kovno, Lithuania. She attended a Lithuanian speaking school. Just when she was about to graduate, the Nazis invaded her country. So here I have a marker here where Kovno is in Lithuania. And for some of you who have a mental map, this is near Lithuania is near the Baltic Sea. The Latvia and Estonia are part of the Baltic countries. And this is where she lived. Her city of Kovno was a center of Jewish learning. The yeshiva was one of Europe's most prestigious institutions of higher Jewish learning. It had many organizations, 40 synagogues, daily newspapers, Yiddish and Hebrew were spoken, and many Hebrew businesses. So this is a typical street, pre-war, pre-Nazi occupation, and people are enjoying life, maybe going into the businesses. It seems that they were happy. And that was the idea of what pre-war Jewish life was all about. Then she and her family were sent to a ghetto, and it was called the Kovno Ghetto. She became a member of a group called the AFO, which means the Anti-Fascist Organization. She was a slave laborer, and if you can see by this picture, it was truly grueling work that she did. This is where she met her husband, Misha Robinson, and they escaped the Kovno Ghetto to do more work in the forest. And this is what she did in the forest and in the ghetto. She smuggled food, smuggled guns, and a radio. Remember that the radios were banned from all Jews that were taken by the Nazis. She created a newspaper for the Jews there so that they could understand what was happening in the area. And most of all, she distributed food, medicine, and clothing. And even though this was noble work for her and her husband, she felt that she needed to do more substantial work in fighting the Nazis. So here she joins the partisans. She was blonde, she could speak Lithuanian. They asked her to go on spy missions against the Nazis. And here she reached out and stayed in a forest with a partisan resistance group in the Rudeniki forest. And here's a picture of typical boys and young men who lived in the forest. All right, and these were resistance fighters who lived in the forest in large groups. Some of them were up to 1,200 people. And they lived there trying to escape what the Nazis did. But at the same time, they were into sabotage. They were into killing Nazis. They were interested in smuggling food from area neighbors who were against them. And eventually, these people killed over 3,000 German soldiers. And even at that, in 1944, all right, 15% were women. 15% of those partisan groups were women who were fighting, smuggling, making grenades, repairing weapons, bringing up children in the forests. This is a photograph of what the Rudeniki forest would have looked like after they left. Now, they didn't stay in one place at one time. They moved from place to place. And here is a photograph of some women partisans. All right. Sarah is not in this photograph. But here she is because she survived. All right. They moved to a town called Vilna after liberation. And her mother, unfortunately, died in a concentration camp. All right. She moved to Canada and became a professor in York University. This is the book that she wrote. You're welcome to find it on Amazon or maybe at some of the local libraries. And I believe teachers down here, this is the YouTube, if you would like to listen to her interview. So that is Sarah Janate. All right. It's gone. All right. Hannah Senis, Hungarian paratrooper and poet. Probably thinking, why is a female in the 40s jumping from an aircraft in a parachute? But that was one of the things that she wanted to do. Plus, she's known for her beautiful writings. She was born in Budapest, Hungary. And here's a map of Hungary, where Budapest is. It's the capital. Romania, Serbia, Croatia, Austria are surrounding those countries. Her father was an author and a journalist, and that what gave her the inspiration to be a writer. Her mother was an elegant homemaker, and this is a photo of her brother, George, who did not make it. All right, Hannah loved to write. She wrote diaries. She wrote songs. She wanted to become a writer. Even though she was Jewish, she attended a Protestant school. But unfortunately, the tuition for her, because she was Jewish, was sometimes much more expensive than all the other kids that went to the school. All right. Eventually, when she got older, she moved to Palestine, which formerly was Palestine, and then after liberation became the state of Israel. And that's where she attended an educational agricultural school. All right, at the school, here's a photo of her feeding chickens. She worked with grapefruits, she scrubbed floors, she picked olives. She worked in the dairy and the bakery and the chicken house. She was always wondering what she was doing there. Her words, her thoughts were always imposed upon her, and she hoped that she wasn't wasting her time in this agricultural school. But luckily, she joined the Allied forces in Egypt and was trained by the British forces to become a partisan fighter. And she was one of 33 people to learn how to parachute over enemy territory. When she parachuted over Yugoslavia, she spent 3 months with partisan groups. This is where she wrote her most famous poem, Blessed is the Match. I particularly like this poem because it is a call to service for all of us, if you'd allow me to read it. Blessed is the match that consumed in kindling flame. Blessed is the flame that burns in the secret fastness of the heart. Blessed is the heart with strength to stop its beating for honor's sake. Blessed is the match consumed in kindling flame. So maybe you want to take a look at this poem, and after you learn about Hannah and all of the others, they were the match, consumed in a kindling flame of service and of daring and resistance, and how beautiful that was for her. These aren't pictures of Hannah per se, but these are what in the 40s in World War II, being in an aircraft and jumping out of a plane with a parachute, what that looked like for her and her others. All right. She was held prisoner after she crossed over into Hungary. All right. All right. She refused to break silence of what was happening. She was very defiant at her trial. She was sentenced to death, but she never asked for forgiveness or to let herself go. Hannah was executed by firing squad in 1944 at the young age of 23. She refused to be blindfolded when they executed her by firing squad. And also her mother, was forced to watch her execution. This is one of her last letters that I found. Dear mother, I don't know what to tell you. I will only say this, 1,000 thanks and more, and forgive me if you can. After all, you will understand better than anyone else that words are not necessary now. With great love, your daughter. And so I found the actual copy of the letter that I put in here for you. This is the book that you can order from Amazon or Barnes and Noble. And it's a really quick read, but it tells everything that I've told you here. Her memorials are in 2 places. Since she was born in Budapest, Hungary, they erected a huge stone with a poem on top for people to realize that she was a Hungarian, but yet she was called the heroine of Israel. And so Israel, that's where she's buried, in a Jewish cemetery. They put a gravestone here again, it's in Hebrew. And if you can see that there is an engraving of a parachute on the corner that people can recognize, and her picture there. So that is Hannah. All right, I'm trying to get back. Close that. Sorry. Okay. Now we have another Hannah, but her pronunciation is Henneke Ipich. And she was a teenage Dutch resistance fighter. Here's her story. Hannah was born in Holland in March of 1945. Holland is also known as the Netherlands, and its capital is Amsterdam. A picture of the Netherlands, and this is where she lived, in Haarlem in the Netherlands. Germany, Belgium are all surrounding those countries. All right. And of course, a lot of people equate the Netherlands and Holland with windmills and clogged shoes and tulips. But yes, they did have windmills. Family photos, here we go. Hanneke was the youngest daughter of a prominent Christian minister and his wife. She was very wealthy. The minister was very wealthy. They built a beautiful home called a parsonage, which is a picture below here. And her father became part of the resistance too. And over here is a photograph of her parents. Hanneke and her sister. All right, here you see them as little girls, and they're dressed very beautifully in clothes that maybe other kids in the area didn't get to have. And so, but she wanted to do other things. And let's see what she did. In the spring of 1940, Germany invades the Netherlands. The Dutch army surrendered, so that means Nazi occupation took place. Little did she know that her father was part of the resistance. She wanted to be part of one too. But first, in order for the Nazis not to get all of their belongings, they hid copper, brass, pewter items, kettles, plates, and other metals that the family owned. And maybe you can discuss, where do you think they hid them for safekeeping? And why do you think they hid them? And this is a photograph of a common church, of a Dutch Reformed church in the Netherlands. At home, Hanneke overheard a conversation between her and her father and a woman named Gert van Houten. Hanneke then followed Van Houten to her house and spoke to her because she wanted to participate in the resistance. In this way, Hanneke became involved in the resistance without her father knowing it. All right, so Hanneke's first mission was to meet a stranger that would give her an assignment to bring some ID papers and food coupons in order to buy food to a Jewish family that was hiding in an old house. She also received the first of her false ID names, and it was Ellie Van Dyke. And this is an actual photograph of the vegetable store where Ellie and other resistance people would meet. It was a good front. It was a good deceit that there were vegetables and in the front of the store and in the back of the store, or maybe in a basement, in a cellar. That's where they would meet. Hanneke also worked for this gentleman called Walraven van Hall. He was a very wealthy man, and his business was finance and in banking. He found ways to steal from the Dutch banks in order to give that money to the resistance movement and to the leaders of the resistance. She joined that resistance group, and her name became Miep and became the personal courier of Walraven van Hall, which means she would go from place to place on her bike, all right, arranging meetings, giving money, large amount of money. All right, and just down here, I put $1 equals 1.87 guilders, which is Dutch money. That's it today. But at the time in 1940, I researched, it was $1 equaled 2.65 guilders, which means that the value of the guilder has decreased over, 80 years. So here's a photograph of Walraven van Hall. All right, Hanneke and Walraven and others, senior members of the resistance, were arrested in Amsterdam in her home. All right, she was interrogated and put in prison. Here is the prison that they were in. All right, and Van Hall and the others were executed. She survived. And it was by the grace of God that she survived. Her parents would bring in towels and linens for her bed. And this is a very interesting photo that she wrote letters to them, the size of what you see in this picture. Little itty bitty pieces of cloth taken away from the linens and the towels, and she would write to them as to what was happening and what she would like for them to do for her. So this is Hanneke. All right, she moved to Sweden, got married, then she and her husband opened a bed and breakfast. Very happy life. All right, she lectured at many schools. She also wrote children's books. And this is the book that I read. It's called Sky. Again, it's a very easy read that would pique your interest. And she died in 2012 from Alzheimer's. And that is Hanneke Ippich. All right. Sorry about that. I'm trying to get out of that. Can't get that. I'll try it again. All right. Corrie ten Boom, 1892 to 1983. She was in her 50s when she started her resistance. Let's learn about her. And that says to restart. That's right. All right. We'll move on to Irina Sandler. All right. I got it. All right. Irina Sandler. All right, Irina was born in 1910 in a small town called Otwock, Poland, which is southeast of the city of Warsaw. So here's a picture, a map of Poland, and I put a little flashlight next to Warsaw. All right, it's the capital of Poland today. And if any of you are interested, just by chance, to know where Auschwitz is in the lower quadrant of Poland, and Auschwitz is the location of the Auschwitz-Birkenau concentration camp, death camp. And here's a quiet little street in Otwock, Poland. Again, life in pre-war was quiet and people were happy. They did all of the things that you and I could do, shopping and movies and going to the park, swimming and dancing. And here we have just a quiet existence in Poland before Nazi occupation in 1939. All right, here are her parents. Her father was a doctor, all right? Her father died in February of 1917 from typhus while treating patients with typhus, all right? And his colleagues, his other doctors, were refusing to treat his patients because they were afraid of contracting it as well. A good thing was that the community leaders and neighbors decided to help pay for Irina's education after her father passed away. Here's a picture of Otwock, Poland, okay? I guess this is a train station and people look well dressed. Here's an older car, but people looked very happy and doing their own thing every single day. A typical marketplace in Otwock, all right? The markets were outdoors. You know, they would bargain for food and other supplies. All right, here is a picture of Irina. She worked in a place called a canteen. And here you see that you would think that she was a nurse, but she disguised herself as a nurse in order to get into the Warsaw Ghetto. During this time in the canteen, she serviced orphans, the poor, and the elderly with clothing, financial aid, medicine, and it was the children that she really had a love for in protecting. All right, here starts her true resistance. She found ways to register children under Christian names so that Nazis would not kill them. All right, and she had to find ways to do that. All right, she reported Jews of having typhus, which is caused by fleas and lice. And here's a picture up at the top of a magnified picture of a louse and more lice. and tuberculosis, which is a disease that affects the lungs. Nazis were deathly afraid of getting those two diseases. So anybody that was bringing medicine to Jews, they would let them in. And at the same time, in the ghetto, when she was going into the Warsaw Ghetto, she managed to bring medicines to those who were ill and smuggle out children, particularly babies. And they were taken out in ambulances, toolboxes, body bags, food boxes, and even coffins as a deceit to the Nazis who would let her take them out. Inside those materials, those boxes, containers, was maybe one child, two babies, and she would find ways to reach convents where Catholic nuns live, or other Christian orphanages where they would be given new identifications with a Christian name and also a baptismal certificate to prove that they were in some way Christians, to be out of harm's way. All right. No one ever refused taking these children. Here's some pictures of what the Warsaw Ghetto looked like. All right. It was confined. It placed hundreds and hundreds of families into a small area so that the Nazis could keep control of them. No one is allowed to leave or enter. The sanitation was horrible. The food supply was just as bad, and people died even on the streets. All right. But Irina had permission from the Warsaw Epidemic Control Department to enter and exit the ghetto as she pleased. She even wore a blue armband to show her support of the Jewish population there. Eventually, with all of her work, Irina was arrested and she was tortured at the Pawiak prison. Both of her arms and legs were broken. However, she managed to be set free by other people outside of the prison on the very day that she was to be executed. But luckily, she was the only person who knew the identities of 2,500 little children that she saved. So here is a black and white photo of what the Pawiak prison looked like and what it looks like in remnants today. All right. Irina kept the names of the children before she was arrested in milk jars, hid them in backyards of different people. And after the war, she was lucky to dig them up, and she tracked down some of the families that were still alive to tell them where their children, where their babies were. She's lovingly known as the Polish angel. And teachers, you can also go on YouTube to hear a small interview of her. And this is a great book, Irina's Children, if you would ever want to get that book to read on your own. In 1965, Irina was awarded the medal as being one of the righteous among the nations, which is a worldwide honor that happens at Yad Vashem Museum in Jerusalem. And a tree at Yad Vashem was placed in her honor because of the work that she did in rescuing at least 2,500 children. And Yad Vashem is the most authentic and the most famous museum in the world for Holocaust research and documentation. And here is her family with the plaque and the tree that was planted in her honor. And I'll stop screaming. I don't think I can get into Corrie ten Boom. Try one more time. Don't think so. But anyway, I can tell you about her. All right. Corrie ten Boom lived in the Netherlands, in Holland, and she was part of the Dutch Reformed Church. And she and her family were part of the resistance. Her family was very, very religious. They prayed all of the time. She believes that her prayers saved her. So they had, her father was a watchmaker and jeweler, and she became one of Holland's most famous watchmakers, female watchmakers. They had a store. And again, just like one of the others who had a vegetable store, and then the resistance group in the back, that was Hannah Ippich, they hid people in their home upstairs. So I wish I could show you the pictures of the cutout closet that was created for 6 people only to stand shoulder to shoulder next to one another. During the day, they were allowed to be in the Ten Boom home, but when they knew that the Gestapo or the Dutch police were coming, they would hurry up the stairs. They would only have 90 seconds. They would bring all of their belongings and bring it up to the closet and just stand there silently. Well, that went on for quite a while, and eventually her family was arrested, including Corey. Her father died in prison. But remarkably, the Gestapo and the Dutch police never ever found that little linen closet that held 6 people at a time. And so maybe you can go online and find the pictures of that. I'm sorry that I can't show that to you, but Corey survived, and she spoke around the world about our call to courage, our call to be brave, our call to have care and compassion. And so with that, I would like to leave you with just a few comments that these women were so remarkable for me. I thought that reading their books gave me such inspiration, and I hope that you do some research or read their books as well, because to care, they all had the understanding and the wisdom and the wherewithal within their bodies to care about what was happening in their community and their society as a whole. And from that care and from that compassion, they dared to go outside of the box, to think outside of the box of what can I do to help my fellow man. And so with that, we're called to do the same thing. We know about the history, we know about the horrors of the Holocaust, but what about the lessons of friendship, of telling the truth, of being an upstander rather than a bystander or an onlooker? What can we do every day that will turn that history into the hope for our future? And I thank you so much for being with me today. Thank you.
Again, we want to thank Wendy for being with us today and powering through our technical difficulties. There was a great presentation, lots of wonderful information. So I did want to mention, so Wendy lives in Davie, Florida with her husband. She retired in 2020 as a middle school English language arts teacher at St. Jerome Catholic School in Fort Lauderdale after 32 years of service. Her passion is to cultivate within her students a love for history through literacy works. For more than 15 years, she broadened the scope of her knowledge in the areas of Holocaust education. She studied at the U.S. Holocaust Museum in Washington, D.C., has attended countless summer enrichment classes and Holocaust institutes, and in 2005, she received the Distinguished Teacher Award by the National Catholic Education Association for Region 4, which is the South Atlantic states. She's also a recipient of the prestigious Museum Teacher Fellowship Program at the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum in D.C. St. Jerome School has been awarded the nationally known No Place for Hate recognition by the ADL, for which Wendy is the project director. And Wendy considers the ADL's Advanced Bearing Witness mission trip to Israel as her most meaningful personal and professional experience. So again, we thank Wendy for being with us today. We also want to take a moment just to thank our sponsors, including the Texas Holocaust, Genocide, and Anti-Semitism Commission, and all of our community sponsors for their generous contributions to our programming. And then we also would like to thank our viewers for being with us today. You can learn more information about Texas Holocaust Remembrance Week and view presentations from the week at hmmsa.org/THRW. And we also ask if you would consider filling out a post-event survey located on our website after viewing this presentation. Again, thank you for joining us. We appreciate you being here.